Good morning and welcome to the new episode of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. There was a report recently by United States and United States was aghast at this report and then prevailed on United Arab Emirates because China was secretly, without the knowledge of anybody, constructing a military facility at an Abu Dhabi port. But that should not come as a surprise. Right from 2017, China has been building, acquiring, operating military bases in the foreign countries. Of course, the first military base was Djibouti in Horn of Africa. And this growing interest in acquiring foreign military bases, reported for more than a decade now, has been increasing exponentially. And people are amazed that China is building them, but this, as I said, it should not come as a surprise. As a matter of fact, it is building its second military base at Ream in Cambodia. But Washington, though it was successful in asking UAE to stop the construction, they failed as far as Cambodia was concerned, but that goes on. Here's a very interesting comment by Mr. Singh Jaspal. And he says, I think it might be only to create fear psychosis with smaller nations like Cambodia, Ceylon, etc. And maybe China is running out of stockpiling for the production. Well, Singh, not exactly. Fear psychosis to some extent is always there with expansionist powers, whether they are Western powers like USA, Germany, or whatever. Because by creating fear, they make others toe their line. But it's not the only factor. There are various other factors in the geopolitical situation. It can be economic factor. Mostly it's economic factor. Then it's a personal likes and dislikes. Then it's purchasing the political leaders, as has happened in Pakistan. And to some extent in Sri Lanka when India was thrown out of the bid to manage the port and China was successful. And then as far as running out of the place for stockpiling is concerned, no, even that's not possible because they are not running out. And they don't need much of a land there. And China, if it wants, can decimate its own population to get it. No, let's not forget, coming to the topic, the most important thing is we have to remember that China is today's second largest economy and the wealthiest nation in the world. It's a great trading power and it has a rapidly growing navy. And its geopolitical ambition is boundless. So China is bound to get sooner than later a permanent naval presence in the Indian Ocean. And for that purpose it wants military base in those countries which are exposure to the Indian Ocean. Because it will be counteracting India. And India's security environment would be altered. That's a major thing. Of course, the other thing is to stop USA from interfering in Indo-Pacific region. So the recent annual report on Chinese military power cites several countries that are being targeted by China for military bases. Myanmar, Thailand, Sri Lanka are candidates from the Bay of Bengal area. And there are many places to the west of India, including Namibia, Seychelles, Tanzania, and UAE. Now, Pakistan, of course, belongs in a category by itself, with a long-standing and deep political and military ties to China, Pakistan is likely to emerge as the most important vehicle of Chinese naval power projection in Indian Ocean. And that would have a significant implication for the Indian military planning, for the Quad, and for USA. In the past, China, the communist China, claimed it was different from the West and had no interest in projecting power to distinct countries. It actively campaigned against military presence of USA in Asia, and as a defensive power in the second half of the 20th century, China's priority was to fend off foreigners coming to Asia or any other thing because it wanted to be on its own. It didn't want the sovereignty of any country to be threatened. But then, as it became a power in the 21st century, its whole perception changed, the attitude changed. And this led to a debate within the Chinese security establishment. The first step was to recognize that China had interests beyond its borders, that it was no longer confined to look internally, it was going to look outwardly. In a series of reports from 2000, Beijing confirmed that its large globalized economy and a growing reliance on the foreign market and resources had created interest far from Chinese border. So one of the propositions was establishment was that should China acquire the foreign military bases to secure a regional and a global interest. And the decision was go ahead. So China went ahead very cautiously in establishing foreign sources. Beijing knows that the term military base is politically loaded, so it doesn't use this term military base. It understood that the military imperative of base to necessary for powerful projection. If you want to project that you are powerful, you need to have a military base. But that has to be balanced against the inevitable politics of the national resentment. Nowadays, each country wants its nation to have some say. So, if any government gives a permission, the opposition to that government inside the country would say, well, look here, our nationality is being compromised. So, China's focus was on building dual-use facilities rather than out-and-out military bases on the foreign sides. The Jyoti, basically, had been an exception to this trend, and it welcomes foreign bases on its land. It doesn't have any resources, so it was leveraging its strategic position in the Horn of Africa. And China's dual-use approach to gaining strategic access on distant shores benefited immensely from its foreign extensive port construction in the last 2 decades. Those countries under Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. It was to build infrastructure. So they said, we are building a road, so why don't we build this base as well, which you can use. And then they said, you don't have that much, so we will use it for you and we'll pay you. So in Abu Dhabi, the Chinese contract was to build a civilian facility. But then, nowadays you can't hide these things. There was a satellite imagery and other intelligence, and that convinced US policymakers that secret construction of a military facility was going on. And then US formally took up the issue with the government in UAE, which is one of the military partners in the Gulf. The picture is different in the subcontinent. China's focus has been on developing structures that are formally civilian, but can be used by the Chinese for the military purpose as and when needed. So strategic location is one of the prime considerations for a base, but the location doesn't automatically translate into military access just because China wants it. It depends a lot on the nature of overall relationship with the target nation. Sri Lanka was a bit annoyed with India, so they said, okay, we'll invite China. That's it. So a lot depends on the overall relationship. And this in turn means, and Chinese are expert in that, in cultivating special relationship with the political elite as well as strengthening ties with the military establishment in the host countries. So arms transfers, military diplomacy, so they became an integral part of the Chinese quest for the foreign business. The revelation that the China was constructing a secret military facility at Port Khalifa in UAE confirms two things. A, China's growing strategic ambition, and secondly, stealth and deceit with which it is expanding in military footprint beyond the border. So US government held urgent meetings with the authorities, gave them the satellite images, and UAE immediately stopped the project, saying that it was not aware of what's happening, which is doubtful. They must have been aware, but they didn't want to accept it. So this supposed ignorance should not provide much comfort to Delhi and others. They should know that in IOR, Indian Ocean region, any such activity would be prejudicial to India. As I said earlier, for much of the 20th century, China eschewed foreign military bases in the name of national sentiment. However, under President Xi, China is using all tools at disposal to build up its military bases, as I started with Djibouti, and other locations are the dual use strategy again, Gwadar and Karachi in Pakistan, Hambantota in Sri Lanka, and so on. So China has established a presence at key points in the Indian Ocean region through promise of economic and infrastructure partnerships. As in UAE, these locations can be used covertly, overtly, and gradually for military purposes. And that's why there are ongoing protests in Pakistan against Gwadar and the objections in other countries earlier. So Beijing may face some political hurdles. Its economic might and ability to co-opt political elite helps it surmount all the challenges. They buy the political leaders, they buy the army. No, Khalifa Port incident makes it clear that even the closest friends of India, like UAE, have to do business with China. And China leverages its economic might for such strategic advantage. Here India has to play a major role. The Chinese infrastructure projects in the region are suspect because they are dual use. And US has taken cognizance of this factor, and now the US scrutiny will keep friends and allies like UAE and Pakistan on their toes. May not be in favor of India, but in favor of US at least. No, New Delhi cannot compete on an equal footing as far as the resources are concerned, economic resources. So, it has to take such a step. Now, UAE is a member of the second Quad. Israel, UAE, India, USA. So, India can, in collaboration with Israel and USA, ensure a rule-based order in the Indian Ocean region, IOR. Even as it's speaking and seeking military bases and facilities in Indo-Pacific region, China is playing a double game. It continues to campaign against US military presence in Asia, but it's expanding its own military reach while trying to push America out. So it has two objectives. A, to encircle India. Second, to keep USA away. So China's approach to USA is like its Indian strategy, seeking military access to the subcontinent and Indian Ocean and undercutting Delhi's strategic partnerships in the region. Now this brings us to the similarities between Chinese and Indian positions on foreign military bases. In the second half of the 20th century, India, like China, was opposing military bases in Asia. But here's a big difference. For China, the opposition to the military bases was based on the assessment of direct security consequence of the foreign bases. Mao Zedong saw the military presence of USA in 1950s as a part of US effort to oppose communism. So he was saying that okay, let US have the military base in Asia, because at that time he was also annoyed with Russia. So China saw the value of US military presence in containing, and the term used by Mao at that time was Soviet socialist imperialism. And then he said if US military bases are there, then Japan would not militarize, so he called latent Japanese militarism. Today, China has strength. At that time, China was not that strong, neither in military, nor economically, nor in technology. So today, it doesn't fear Russia because Russia has gone down rather. And Japan is already militarizing. So it says, okay, but I can handle both of them myself. USA, you keep off. So Chinese military capabilities have improved. Along with that, its political ambitions have increased. So USA must be thrown out of Asia. But at the same time, India is rising, so we have to curb India. So these are the twin objectives of China in establishing these foreign military bases. So if the rejection of the military bases was political and contextual at that time, India's opposition was ideological one. It opposed military bases from all countries, whether it was Russia, China or USA. It was non-aligned. And the absence of the foreign military bases was considered to be the main criteria for admission in the so-called non-aligned movement. And even more consequentially, independent India began to dismantle the military network it had inherited from the British Raj. So the military isolation became a conscious ideological choice for India in the 20th century, and that was a mistake. Now in the 21st century, like Beijing, the security establishments have noted that India's growing strategic interests are not only confined to from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, no. They extend beyond the borders. And that's why Rajiv, for the first time, sent me immediately to Maldives. It wanted to assert Malay, Maldives, Seychelles. India has to be there. So, as the inevitability of Chinese naval power projection in the Indian Ocean became clear, Delhi began to recognize the need for military access to these strategic positions as well. So conflict is there. But then India has lost a lot of time in the first decade of the 21st century. But in the last few years, India has stepped up its military diplomacy and is on a much higher curve as far as military superiority is concerned. Now, Delhi's efforts to secure access involved negotiating arrangements with the friendly nations, as well as developing strategic partnerships with USA and other regional allies. But if you compare with China, It's a long way behind China. It cannot match the speed and intensity of Chinese military diplomacy. That's why in Sri Lanka it failed and China was successful. But the growing gap has to be bridged. Otherwise it could present a serious problem for India in near future. And that is what is worrying the military strategists today, rather military diplomacy today. Because if we cannot build, when I say we, I mean India, cannot bridge that gap which exists with China, then it is in for trouble. And that is something. But China's twin objective is, Mr. Singh Jaspal, not to terrify small players like Cambodia, Sri Lanka, Myanmar. They have no role to play in the geopolitical stage. It is to create a fear psychosis in India and make India feel, look here, we are here, you remain inside the country. And at the same time tell USA, we are the custodians of Indo-Pacific region, you need not come here. So these objectives, keeping America away and also in circumscribing the capability of India, they are the main reasons for China to acquire openly or by stealth military bases in the foreign lands. So we have to keep our options open and do counter action that is needed.